We have some massive news to discuss today as a recent report by Frank Saravalli has revealed a new Toronto Maple Leafs free agency target, and who that player is might surprise you, so you're going to want to stay tuned for that in this episode. As well as the report, we're going to break it down as it reveals that a Mitch Marner trade could be coming in order to make room for this free agent. So stay tuned for all that. Before we do, if you're a part of the large percentage who aren't subscribed, make sure to hit that button. It would mean the world to Darius and myself. Now, Darius, let's not waste any more time. A lot to get into today. Very, very interesting report has come out. And this is a player we've discussed in the past, but given the current situation of Mitch Marner's contract, the Leafs cap space, which we'll dive into as well, there's a lot that goes into any signing that the Toronto Maple Leafs are making right now. But let's dive right into it. And this is Jake Guentzel. The Leafs are grouped with a handful of teams that can make a run at Jake Guentzel in free agency. This likely happens only if Mitch Marner is dealt away. And we'll dive into the report more here in a second. But Darius, what are your thoughts on this? This is the first official concrete report that has linked Jake Guentzel to the Toronto Maple Leafs, a very, very good player. And it also kind of links and hints at the fact that Mitch Marner could be heading elsewhere.
Yeah, of course. If they were to get Jake Guentzel in this year's free agency, Mitch Marner would have to be on the way out. They would have to make salary for this player. And we'll get into salary specifics a little bit later in the video, but obviously a great player, right? I'm sure the Leafs would like to have interest in him. But again, this is a hypothetical. Something big has to happen for them to be able to sign this player. And there's a lot of other teams that are interested in Jake Guentzel that have the salary cap already ready to go, or the salary space to be able to give it to him. So it's going to be pretty interesting. Obviously, the Leafs are linked to almost everybody at this point, and this is some speculation, right? But should be pretty interesting. I think it would be an interesting trade-off of players if that were to happen.
Yeah, and obviously Frank Saravalli is a pretty notable reporter, so to hear it from him is interesting. And you think about Jake Guentzel, we'll get into all that in a second. A lot would have to go into getting the salary space, the salary cap room to make a signing like that work, but that would be a pretty big splash. And again, if they trade Mitch Marner for some other players that have less cap hit and they do some other roster juggling, it could look like a very different team come October. But you can see here, Guentzel would A, be cheaper than Marner by probably $2+ million, and B, perform in the playoffs. So a lot of fans are kind of coming to Jake Guentzel's side, and that's the thing. And this is excluding the haul you'll get back for Mitch Marner. So you're adding hopefully maybe a defenseman or a goalie, depending what it is for Mitch Marner. And then you're also getting Jake Guentzel in free agency, which will kind of replace a lot of what Mitch Marner does. You can see here from Donnie and Dolly, I'd be all over it. And that was you can see on if Jake Guentzel would be a good fit for the Canucks. Like, there's so many different teams that are going to be going after Jake Guentzel. You have the Canucks. You have really probably half the teams in the NHL. There's going to be a lot of competition, and that's why we're showing you this tweet here. But I think that it would make so much sense, and it's really good. Handful of teams. So realistically, there's probably not 15 teams that are going to actively go after him. Probably maybe 6 or 7 that could pursue him. But Darius, very, very good player. And again, would fit perfectly if Mitch Marner is traded, would almost be his replacement. And then you'll also get the assets back from a Marner trade. So it might be wishful thinking, but this could be a big plan for Brad Treliving if this report ends up being true.
Yeah, you make a good point about obviously the return for Mitch Marner, and then you get this player in free agency if this were to work out. So that's a lot of new pieces coming in to the Leafs. So obviously a lot of pieces are going to have to go out. So the Leafs could look very different next year if this were to play out. But in terms of Guentzel, I think he wants to play for a contender. So obviously whatever amount of teams that there are, I think you're right. I think it's like 6 or 7 teams. They're probably all going to be contenders. He doesn't strike me as the type that's going to just cash out and want to go play wherever. I think he's going to want to probably play and be competitive, at least in a few years to come, right? So he's a playoff performer. Leaf fans are really only looking for playoff success right now. That's what matters. We've seen regular season success over the last 8 years, and this guy is a playoff player. When he won the Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, he had 21 points in 25 playoff games. He's almost a point a game player in the playoffs. And again, this year with the Carolina Hurricanes, when he got traded there, really good playoff performance. This guy plays in the playoffs. If you need a guy to score goals in the playoffs, which is another thing the Leafs have been lacking, this is the guy in the NHL that you want. He scores a lot of goals in cup finals as well when he goes. So, this is a great player. Obviously for the Leafs, this would be a great thing if they were to. And like you mentioned as well, they free up a lot of salary cap space if they get Mitch Marner, if they trade him somewhere else. You still have about $3 million with what he's projected to make, Jake Guentzel, that is. So pretty interesting stuff here.
Yeah, and again, Guentzel's going to be making a lot less than Mitch Marner, obviously, but he's a borderline elite player and one that performs in the playoffs as well. And you can look at it here. if you look at some of the ways that they can make some of this cap space, it would be solid if Toronto can liquidate a few of their own guys that they seem to be willing to move, David Kemp, Cal Yarncroc, and Timothy Liljegren, and then address everything in the UFA effectively at reasonable cap hits. They would get better. They get a few picks in the process. And then if they trade Mitch Marner, I don't think a Mitch Marner trade by any means is going to be a pick-focused trade. It will definitely be either a defenseman or a goalie. We saw Jacob Markstrom. He's off the board now. It looks like he's heading to New Jersey, which was always kind of seemed like the inevitable spot. But maybe a UC Saros package, whatever ends up being for Mitch Marner, something that you can address other needs, areas of needs and concern for the Leafs. But you're looking at some of the things here, Darius. You see, the Leafs could be in the mix to sign Jake Guentzel if they can trade Mitch Marner. A bit of a typo there, that's fine. Other teams that could take a run at Guentzel include the Canucks, Panthers, Capitals, and also the Rangers. So that's an interesting thing here. And Darius, you can see a few of the teams. We mentioned them earlier. Like, a lot of these teams are very, very good. So it might take some convincing for the Toronto Maple Leafs to get Jake Guentzel to Toronto. That being said, it seems like most teams that are, get him or who come to Toronto are always willing to stay and really love it here. But 77, like, he has been an over point per game player. This is some would argue, and I can guarantee you, I don't know how I'm feeling on it yet. I'll have to think on it more. That he's better than Mitch Marner. Some people will definitely think that, especially given his playoff production, not obviously directly regular season, but playoff production. You can make a case that you'll get more value out of him, especially given this Toronto Maple Leafs team, even if it's just a change of scenery, than you will Mitch Marner next season, especially given all the crazy stuff that's been going on with him and his agent.
I don't think it's outrageous to think that Guentzel's going to make less. He has a track record of playoff success, and he's a point a game player or just a little bit above every single year. Mitch Marner will probably get you more points in the regular season, but like we've talked about, again, the Leafs as a whole are a good team and will continue to be and will make the playoffs. What matters now is playoff success, right? And Jake Guentzel, for example, is a guy who has a track record of that, right? He's really good in the playoffs, and not only that, he's one of the best historically in cup finals. So the Leafs need a player like this, whether it's him or somebody else. This could be very interesting for the Leafs, that's for sure.
Yeah, and again, the big moving pieces here is going to be the Mitch Marner trade, which will probably be the first domino to fall before any of these other players get signed by the Leafs. And we saw the coaching staff. They hired their associate coach, their assistant coach. They have that sorted out now, aside from one spot that's left. And now they just need to go ahead and really dive into free agency. But it's going to be hard to do that without Mitch Marner being there. And you mentioned it. Very, very good player. I'm very curious to see. You can kind of compare the two. 85 points, 69 games, 77 points, 67 games. But you're paying this guy less and he performs better in the playoffs. And this isn't hating on Mitch Marner, even though a lot of Leafs fans are kind of done with him. But let us know in the comments, who would you prefer to have in the Leafs next season if all things were equal? Jake Guentzel or Mitch Marner? I'm curious to see that. And yeah, make sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 11,000. And Darius, hopefully Mitch Marner trade gets going soon, or something, a resolution regarding Mitch Marner comes, because that's ultimately the biggest obstacle in the way. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you soon.